The company has seen gains. The counter has seen gains of almost 30% in the last 6 months. The company has raised fresh capital last month, which was more than double the size of its IPO, in order to fuel its future growth and strengthen its current operations. To help us understand the roadmap, fundamentally speaking, going ahead, joining us now is the President and CEO for Global Services, Mr. Amitabh Jaipuria. Good to have you on the show, Mr. Jaipuria. Thank you so much for joining in. Can you take us through what the hiring outlook on ground seems to be post the IPP that you've recently successfully closed, sir?
Yeah, so Pranay, as you know, we listed in July of 2016, and we listed at a price of roughly, and we issued shares at 300 plus, and we listed at a premium of almost 57%, and we listed at almost 500 rupees. Post that, we did an IPP very recently, and we closed that just last month. And that IPP, in that IPP, we had a mandate to raise between 800 to 900 crores, and which we have successfully closed. And we have raised about 879 odd crores, and that's been an extremely successful exercise for us. And the whole idea was that this capital is being raised from existing investors as well as new investors, and these are all, of course, institutional long-term investors. And they are quite excited by our growth story, and they are quite excited by the kind of businesses that we are in, and that is really the kind of response that we've got. And what excites them is our mix and our portfolio of businesses that we have. So whether you look at the global technology business, whether you look at the industrials business, or whether you look at the people and services, and then of course the facilities businesses. So we have an excellent portfolio of businesses which I think has attracted these investors, and that's why we have got the kind of response that we have. And the kind of money that we have raised, this money, as we have stated earlier, will be used for two main purposes. So one big purpose for this money, of course, is that we are going to use them for strategic M&A. As you know, we are prolific acquirers for the right businesses and for the right fits in our overall portfolio of business services. And the other use of that capital, of course, a part of that capital will be for our organic growth and for our ongoing businesses that we have. So there's going to be a mix and a balance of how we use that capital. But what we expect fully is that this capital will be deployed in a manner which will only accelerate our not only our revenue growth, but really our profitable business growth that we have in our portfolio.
Right. Mr. Jaipuria, what do you have to say about the acquisitions pipeline? I mean, you briefly mentioned inorganic growth and the prospects of that in your answer, but a little more detail. I mean, if you could be a little forthcoming with it as to what all targets do you have in mind, and is there any detail in terms of numbers or some targets that you could share with us which will help you, attain a critical mass in those respective areas?
So Pranay, as you know, we won't be in a position to share specific targets, but let me give you the general scenario of how and which spaces we expect to be interested in as far as scouting for potential acquisition targets is concerned. So we are always looking for targets that are priced right in the first place. So because we are a conservative acquirer, we don't believe in paying large multiples, and when we don't have line of sight to how we are going to get our capital back, and how it's going to be revenue and profit accretive to our business. So that's the first thing, right? It has to be priced right. The second piece really is that it has to fit in our scheme of things in terms of the way it enhances our portfolio. And what we look at is how is it going to give us either a new geography or a new product line, or how is it going to help us increase our footprint in a particular country or in a particular state. So that's really that's one big driver of what kind of acquisitions we look at. The other big driver really is there a tech component to it. So we are interested in technology companies. We are interested in companies that add technology to our existing offerings and hence enhance those offerings. So is there a technology footprint? Is it priced right? And is it revenue accretive and profit accretive?
Right. Mr. Jaipuria, we spoke about the kind of pressure IT is also yielding. I mean, there's a lot of substitution that is happening thanks to artificial intelligence and the push towards digital, not only in IT companies, but also in some of the bigger clients that they're servicing in BFSI. You mentioned briefly about how Captive is kind of compensating for it. Is it compensating one for one? And what's the kind of IT hiring pressure that your business is also facing as a consequence?
So, I'm not an expert on the IT space, but what we are seeing, but we engage with the IT, with the IT companies as very large clients and customers. So what we are seeing is that, of course, there is some amount of compensation that the captives are providing. That's clearly there. Even within the IT space, what is happening is that there is a shift. It's not as if there is a wholesale, attrition of large numbers of people, but there is a skill shift. So what is happening is that people from traditional roles and traditional coding and testing and those kinds of roles are now moving to automation, are now moving to the mobile world, are now moving to apps, are now moving to big data and analytics. They are now moving to cloud computing. Those kinds of things are becoming more and more important. Now, in fact, even the further emerging areas, whether it's robotics, whether it's artificial intelligence, those kinds of areas are now becoming large sinks of talent. So therefore, people are also reskilling. So while there is a realignment by way of traditional skills becoming redundant, but also new skills taking that place. Net, if you ask me, overall, the IT employment scene actually is not that grim at all. So what we are seeing is that there is growth even in that space.
Mr. Jaipuria, and finally, before we let you go, you mentioned that logistics is also a big part of your overall portfolio. So my question to you is that have demonetization and GST been counterbalancing forces? In that, we've spoken to a lot of companies, logistics companies like Blue Dart, a big chunk of their, B2B business, has taken a beating. And even in terms of companies like Flipkart as well as Amazon, that side of their business. But post GST, what we have seen is that there are many companies who don't want to take the trouble and the hassle of compliance with regard to IGST, so they want to push more volumes via logistics companies. So is there a trend of counterbalancing forces that GST and demonetization have played, which is reflecting in hiring trends?
So, Pranay, I think you've picked it up right in the sense that the companies are pushing volumes now quite aggressively, and that is contributing to, as I said, to many of our business lines. We also have a logistics business which we are incubating right now, and we are already amongst the largest partners, last mile delivery partners for quite a few of these larger e-commerce companies. We are seeing volumes pick up, and if you look at what's ahead, the festive season is right now upon us, and you will see that there is a large spike that happens whether it's in people in services businesses or in some of our other businesses. Spikes do happen, and we are already beginning to see that companies are beginning to ramp up for festive sales. So we expect e-commerce to do very, very well from what we are seeing, and we expect many other consumer-oriented businesses also to do very well. So whether it's retail or whether it's in some of the other segments. So I think to our mind at this particular point in time, I think industry has put the short-term effects, whether it's demonetization or whether it's GST, behind us. GST, of course, is still work in progress, and companies are still beginning to sort of now understand the full impact of all the processes. So that might take another month or so to settle down. But overall, on demand, we are not seeing too much of a lingering impact as we look to the future. And